It's Top 5 Tuesday. I'll be giving you my top 5 reasons to be optimistic about the Mariners right now, and Colby will list his top 5 Mariners nicknames coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. This is Teddy Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Top 5 Tuesday, and the wheel has spoken, folks. In just a moment, I'll get into my top 5 reasons to be optimistic about the Mariners right now. And then later on, Colby will give you his top 5 Mariners nicknames. But before we get into that, shout out to our title sponsor today, Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. Sign up now to hear us create our 2025 Mariners off-season plan before we show it off here in the next couple of weeks. All right, so I am doing the top 5 reasons to be optimistic about the Mariners right now. Some of this has to do with the offseason. Some of this has to do with what's in place right now on the roster. We'll get into all that. So, number 5. Let's just start here. I think the clubhouse should be in a healthier spot than it was about a year ago. Last year was obviously really hard on that clubhouse. There was understandably some bitterness about how 2023 ended. And, obviously what happened during the offseason. We guys talk about how disappointed they were, or at least conflicted with what the front office did during the offseason. A lot of new faces came in trying to find their footing, and many of them just did not perform. You had mainstays who struggled, and some paid the price for it, like Ty France. Others, like JP Crawford, really struggled. They blow the 10-game lead, of course. Brant Brown gets fired. Scott Service gets fired. Jared Hart gets fired, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We all know what happened over the course of this past year. But, while they missed the playoffs again, they seem to have finally found some real chemistry with one another in those final, 6-ish weeks. And they obviously started to play better ball, especially offensively. And now it seems like you've identified some real clubhouse guys, some new clubhouse guys. Luke Raley is now established in the clubhouse. Victor Robles is now established in the clubhouse. Maybe they bring Justin Turner back. And obviously you're still in the honeymoon period with Dan Wilson as well. So things are a bit fresh on that front with, the guy who's spearheading the effort. So to me, there's enough newness and carryover from the real good parts of 2024 that I think it's just natural for things to be, a bit lighter in the clubhouse coming into 2025. And I think that should give these guys a much needed reset and, hopefully allow them to play a bit more loose, especially everyone who's been here for the past few years that kind of saw the ups and the downs of the Service era, all that.
Yeah, it's a bummer that, guys like JP and Julio struggled so much for so much of the season that they essentially got, their only manager they ever played for fired. So hopefully, just the reset of Dan Wilson and kind of just the reset of the season can help fix that. They got to put in the work, obviously. But obviously Raley and Robles certainly bring some energy to this clubhouse. And now that they've produced for a year in Seattle, they kind of have the backing to swing their weight around. And Randy Rosarena's resume speaks for itself. So I still feel like they probably should be looking for a kind of a veteran presence. It's I know they wanted it to be like Haniger and Garver and Polanco, but none of those guys produced, and it's really hard to be like that dude in the clubhouse if you're not producing, which is why it's hard for JP to step up into the leadership role because he wasn't productive. So I still feel like they need to go get that guy. Overall, at least it seems like there were certainly more positive vibes towards the end of the year than negative ones. But we'll probably still see more shakeup in the coaching staff. And obviously, there's going to be turnover on the roster. So we'll have to see how they manage all that. But it certainly looks like you've got some new voices in the clubhouse that have now, coming off a productive year, can kind of establish themselves as guys, like dudes in the clubhouse.
So number 4 isn't super exciting, but there's a pretty important element to it. There's some actual starting pitching upside behind your top 5. Now, it's obviously not the kind of upside that, Kirby, Gilbert, Miller, and Wu had as prospects, not even in the ballpark, right? But it's a hell of a lot better than Emerson, Hancock, and Jonathan Diaz, I'll tell you that. Now, a couple of these guys, could get traded. We need to say that first and foremost here this winter. But for now, the Mariners have 3 dudes in Michael Morales, Brandon Garcia, and Logan Evans, who should be more than capable of giving them, at the very least, competitive innings if one of their starting 5 goes down. And that's obviously everyone's concern right now, right? Like, this rotation was remarkably healthy this year. Odds are that's probably not going to happen to the degree it did again. Hopefully it does, but there's a good chance it doesn't, right? And if it doesn't, you're far better equipped to stay afloat with your in-house options than you were this year. And look, for example, if Evans doesn't work out, you go to Garcia. If Garcia doesn't work out, you go to Morales, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're not stuck with having to give the ball to a couple of fringe major leaguers like Hancock, like Diaz, right? And yes, I will acknowledge the possibility here that Evans, Garcia, Morales, those guys, they're not more than fringe major leaguers themselves in 2025. But all 3 took major steps this year. They're all trending up. They all obviously have limitations, right? I'm not trying to sell these guys as like mid-rotation starters, but this organization is very good at getting the most out of its pitching. And really, for that reason alone, I am confident that at least one of them is going to be able to give you something next year if they're called upon. Hopefully they're not. Hopefully they're not called upon, right? But again, odds are at some point you're going to need at least one of these guys, and I feel pretty good about them being able to produce.
Yeah, it also helps that you probably feel pretty good about at least 4 of the starting 5 not having to miss significant time going into next year, because Gilbert, Kirby, Miller, and Castillo never really missed significant time, especially Castillo since joining the Mariners. It's a little ironic because Castillo and Miller both finished the year on the IL, but one of those is a procedural move, the other one a hamstring thing, not like an arm issue. So yeah, it's nice when you feel like you can bank on 4 guys to give you 160 innings, 170 innings at a minimum. So yeah, it obviously lessens the need, but yeah, I mean, at some point somebody's going to get hurt, and pitching is pitching in itself is a violent motion. So yeah, to have some guys, so I'd like there to be a little bit better, somebody with a little more upside, but I mean, you can't have a number 6 starter who's as good as Logan Gilbert in the system. Like that just,
well, and you're not going to sell any free agent on coming to Seattle as depth. Right. I mean, like you might sell like the Austin Voths of the world to be a swing guy. Right. But,
sure. But like, yeah, you're not even going to get like you're
not going to get Sean Manaea to come in.
Whoever this year's Sean Manaea or Luis Severino is, you're not, no, because they're not going to break the rotation. There's no chance unless somebody gets hurt in spring training.
Yeah.
So yeah, having those guys in house is pretty important, and we'll see how fast Senja can proceed. But maybe he joins this conversation in 2026 at some point, and then you might have legitimately 6 mid-rotation guys or better. But yeah, we'll see. It's certainly more upside than Hancock. That's really not a difficult bar to clear. But when you have 2 or 3 guys that could clear that bar, then obviously it should help you out. It's kind of sad that this is your number 4 reason for optimism, AAA pitching, but I'm sure the top 3 are just bangers.
So we are going to go over my top 3 reasons to be optimistic here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Game Time. So I used to live in New Mexico, and down in New Mexico, there are 0 pro sports teams, and a lot of bands and artists that I listen to skip going there more often than not. So when I moved to Toronto, where there's a baseball team, a basketball team, a hockey team, even a soccer team, and there's great music being played every night in the city, I was right in my element. When I want to catch a ball game or my wife and I want to see a band, I always get my tickets through Game Time. And that was the case well before Game Time sponsored our network and before I even joined the network, because it is truly the best ticketing service out there, hands down. I truly believe that. And now it's getting even better thanks to Game Time Picks. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I can just go on the app, it'll show me the best deal right away, it'll show me the exact view I'll have, and most importantly, it'll tell me exactly what I'm going to pay with Game Time's all-in pricing, so there are no annoying little fees that pop up at the last second. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, that's LOCKEDONMLB, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. It is Top 5 Tuesday, and today I am giving you my top 5 reasons to be optimistic about the Mariners right this second. Number 3, the front office might have figured something out with the offense. Now, I'm not definitively saying they have, so let's pump the brakes. I can hear you typing away furiously at your keyboards, but I'm at least open-minded to the possibility that they have figured something out. Look, all 3 of their major offensive additions during the season worked out great. Victor Robles was amazing. Justin Turner was perfectly solid. Randy Arozarena was just as advertised, which is really refreshing to get a guy like that, and he actually hits the way that you expect him to hit, right? And DePoto's outright talked about how they reassessed and they are continuing to reassess their approach to building their offense, and whether it's how they relay their messaging to their hitters or the things they value in the hitters they target, it seems like they have a refreshed way of looking at things. And we saw a significant turnaround in those final 2-ish months that coincided with obviously the arrival of new players like Randy and Turner and new coaching. So hopefully they can build on that. Maybe optimism is a bit too strong in this regard, but at the very least, I think the fact that they're not being stubborn and are willing to try something different should be encouraging.
Yeah, after the last 2 years, where it really feels like they were trying to create like the Mariners way to hit at T-Mobile Park, it seems like their new Mariners way is to just let the guy be who he is and figure it out from there. So instead of trying to force everybody to, adapt your hitting style, you adapt your offense to their hitting style. And so, it's the same thing as Pete Carroll used to say, if we focus so much on what this guy can't do, like what can he do? Well, what can he do? What can we help him do? What can he get better at to make it less of a weakness? But what is his strength? And let's focus on that. So yeah, that appears to be the method that Edgar really hammered home over the last 5 weeks. And I think we're all assuming he'll be involved in some capacity, certainly much more than he was before he was hired as hitting coach, but probably less than he was in the final 5 weeks. And Jerry and Justin and his front office and his analysts, hopefully they've identified something when they're looking for players out in free agency or on the trade market. They've identified some traits or some tools or something specific that they can look at and be like, this means he's probably more likely to be successful here than not. Because like Randy Arozarena was really good at T-Mobile Park, and so was Justin Turner, and so was Robles and Luke Raley. Mm-hmm. So I don't know exactly when they made these changes, but or if they're even going to work. The sample size is still way too small, but whatever they've identified, it seems to have worked at least somewhat. And so now we'll see if they can do it over the course of a full season. But it's only 5 weeks, but it's 5 weeks more than we thought we were going to have, and at the end of August. So it's something.
So coming in at number 2, the Astros and the Rangers are probably not going to get meaningfully better this offseason. In fact, they might get worse. Houston obviously has a great foundation in place, so they're still going to be very competitive. Not saying that they're going to fall off a cliff, but their GM has already said that they're going to have to make some decisions regarding payroll this winter, and they might lose Alex Bregman to free agency. Their farm system is also trash, so I don't see how they're going to add anything substantial via trade. So there is a very good chance they're going to look worse on paper heading into next season. And then with Texas, I mean, they should be healthier next year, and their outlook could drastically change if Josh Young and Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford click. But Jonah Heim was bad this year. Adolis Garcia was bad this year. Marcus Semien was mediocre at the plate. Their pitching staff is a major question mark. Corey Seager was great when he was on the field, but this year proved he can't do it all by himself. They're also set to have the 5th highest payroll heading into the offseason. And they're one of the teams who just had to end their TV rights deal with Bally Sports. So there's a good chance they're not going to spend this winter. Maybe they even wind up being one of those teams that tries to cut payroll, at least to a certain degree this winter.
Sure. Texas also has major questions about their starting rotation and their bullpen. And so while Texas has a better farm system than Houston, a big chunk of their success even last year.
Like they have some guys down on the farm, but it's overall not a great system to trade from.
No. I think, even the 2023 team that won the World Series, good for them. Can't take it back. That team was buoyed by, career years from Jonah Heim and Adolis Garcia, and those guys didn't really struggle at all. And Semien had a very good year, and Corey Seager probably would have been the MVP if he had played enough games. But yeah, now you look at it and say, oh, Jonah Heim, turns out he's not the best offensive catcher in baseball. He's pretty mediocre. And Leotis Taveras, we saw this at the end of last year, or 2023, started to really slow down, and it carried over this year. Young got hurt again, had more surgeries on his wrist. Like Simeon's another year older, Seager's another year older, and Seager's got some back issues that are cropping up. So good for Texas. They took advantage, but I'm not convinced that they were, a real threat anyways coming into 2024, even if everything clicked, because they were banking on so much to repeat that just really wasn't repeatable. So we'll see about Texas and Houston, but in theory, the tide should be turning in your favor in the division. But, honestly, we could have said that started this year because you only needed to win 88 games to win the division, and you missed that chance. So it's still on the Mariners to seize the opportunity they have. Right. But yeah, it certainly does look like the Astros are starting to get to the end of their dynastic run, and the Mariners should be surging to take the mantle right now. But ultimately, they still have to actually do it.
Right. And obviously, the Mariners have their own self-imposed limitations that they have to work around this offseason. But at the very least, they have a much better farm system than either of these teams to trade from. So that gives them a considerable leg up this offseason. I just don't see how either of these teams, which are obviously very talented but incredibly flawed, are going to significantly improve their rosters in the coming months. Now, don't get me wrong, they're going to do some stuff this winter, and maybe they hit big on a couple of those moves, but I just can't foresee either one of them doing something that's going to to turn heads, right? That's going to make us look at their roster and go, oh wow, they did that. I just don't see a path to that happening.
No, unless Houston manages to re-sign Bregman, I think there's a pretty good shot we look at Houston's roster at the end of the offseason and we're just like, it's still good, but it's a half a step below what it was last year even. But the Astros are really good at player development, so you can't write them off until they're actually dead, which might never happen. But yeah, they're certainly more vulnerable over the next couple of years than they have been over the previous few years.
So lastly, number one, a very simple reminder that the Mariners also have a really good foundation in place. We all know how good the rotation is. They have one of the two best players at arguably the most premium position in the sport in Cal Raleigh. Julio's obviously been inconsistent, but we've seen the absolute beast that lies within. You're going to get a full season of Randy Arozarena, who isn't a star, but is a damn good player who can play like a star at times. Luke Raley is an absolute nightmare for right-handed pitchers. Victor Robles is due for regression, of course, but his coming out party didn't just happen for no reason this year. He made a change. And because of that, there should be some optimism he can at least be a solid contributor who's going to bring a ton of energy, right? And by the way, regression works both ways. I don't think JP Crawford is the guy we saw in 2023, but I also don't think he's the guy we saw this year either. And I know this is going to raise some eyebrows, but I also don't think we should rule out a solid bounce back from Mitch Garver. He's had some really good seasons at the plate. And by all accounts, he's a high character dude who puts the work in. I think he's going to be very motivated to turn things around this winter. And while your bullpen absolutely needs help, you did identify a couple guys over the course of this year, and you have an all-star in Andres Munoz. You should get more from Gregory Santos. And hell, you might get Matt Brash back for the second half. This is a good team that could be a great team. Obviously, if ownership supported it better, but even if some of these guys just played to the back of their baseball cards. So shore up the obvious needs on the roster this winter. And the path is absolutely there to competing with anyone because of the pieces you have in place right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not far off. I know sometimes it looks it, but you're really not that far off. And more of a commitment from this ownership group could close the gap in 3 months to where you might be the best roster in the American League. Like, you could absolutely sell me that if ownership were able to, or willing to, I should say, write the checks that they should write. But, we'll have to see. Jerry will have to be creative. But even with the limitations, I really don't think you're that far off. I mean, you get 15% better JP next year, which is only going to put him at a league average bat. You get 15% better Mitch Garver. You get full year of Randy. You get Julio hopefully having his breakout year. The rotation is what it is. The bullpen should be better next year, just due to health. But also they'll get some new arms in there. So yeah, I mean you could easily write a script where the Mariners enter next season as the most talented roster in the American League. Obviously, it depends on what the rest of the AL does. But there's a real opportunity here, a prime opportunity for Seattle to go out, make a couple of key moves, and then, have a couple of guys on their roster turn it around or find consistency without asking them to do something they're not capable of. Like, nobody's asking JP Crawford to be a 139 WRC plus bat again. Can you be 100? Can you be 105? Can you be 110, somewhere in that range? Sure. That's what we're asking you to do. So, yeah, the Mariners could have one of the best rosters in the American League. I don't think they're that far off from having one now. They could probably really use a second star. Obviously the Juan Soto to Aaron Judge is a bit much to ask, but like another 4.5, 5 win player, blah, blah, blah. If you could add that to this roster, I think you're right there, because I think you're deeper than a team like the Yankees. I think you have better pitching than anybody else in the American League. So you're close, but you're starting off at a really high floor of a roster with a solid foundation, and quite a bit of fun prospects coming up the old highway here in the next year or two. So you're in a really good spot. It's just a matter of executing your plan and getting the right guys in here to put you over the top. But you're in a good spot overall.
Right. And you just mentioned it, another bonus reason to be optimistic here. This year is going to be a lot more fun in terms of prospect call-ups. Like, we're going to see Cole Young. We might see Harry Ford at some point. Like, there's going to be some actual, because this year it was Troy Taylor, it was Ryan Bliss, Tyler Locklear. Yeah. We're fine prospects. Don't get me wrong. But we're talking about, like, you might see a couple of the dudes that are in your top 5 right now who could help. So, yeah. All right. So that's my top 5 reasons to be optimistic about the Mariners right this second. Now it's time for Colby's top 5 Mariners nicknames, coming your way in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Yeah, you heard that right. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. It is Top 5 Tuesday. I just gave you my top 5 reasons to be optimistic about the Mariners right now. Now it's time for Colby to give you his top 5 Mariners nicknames. It was his turn to spin the wheel on the less serious topics. So top 5 nicknames is what it landed on for the Mariners specifically, for Mariners players specifically. Who's coming in at number 5, Colby?
Well, real fast, as you know, I like to set up parameters and all that.
Of course.
Yes, I have some rules, and then I have some honorable mentions.
Self-imposed rules.
Because what is a society without rules?
Sure.
So yeah, basically the one rule is no variations of your legal name. So like no A-Rod, no J-Rod, no Cammy, no Nelly, no Ichi, like none of the common baseball names where you just add a Y, like nothing like that. No Gar or anything like that. Like if it's very simply like just your name spelled a little differently, no,
sure.
Like that doesn't count. Everybody has a nickname like that, whatever. That's really it. That's the only thing. I don't know if any of those type of nicknames would have made it anyways, but also I wanted to point out while putting this list together, the serious lack of nicknames for Ichiro is both awesome and kind of sad. Like he doesn't have it. Like somebody said, like Baseball Reference says his nickname is the Wizard. I've never heard anybody call him Wizard. But it's cool that it's like, yeah, it's Ichiro. He doesn't need a nickname. It's Ichiro.
Yeah.
And it's also like such a great player. We couldn't come up with a good nickname for the dude, but whatever. Anyways, so some quick honorable mentions here. Slapped in America. He wasn't here long, but boy, did he do his duty.
I slapped him.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mr. Mariner, Alvin Davis, classic. How about The Bone for Jay Buhner?
Ooh, that didn't make your top 5. Wow.
I feel really good about it too when you get to my top 5. Like not for a second did I consider that. How about Norm Charlton, the Sheriff?
Ooh,
that's a pretty good one for a reliever.
Yeah.
Also, the Rodney Coaster.
Yeah.
Fun.
Is that really a nickname though?
I don't know if it was. That's why I didn't like. I wanted to put it in honorable mentions. You guys can decide if it's a nickname or not. But
sure.
And then finally, how about Death to Flying Things? Franklin Gutierrez.
That's right.
So
the original no-fly zone.
That's right. Julio's an amateur compared to Franklin Gutierrez in his prime. All right, so let's get into this top 5 here. Coming in at number 5, one of my favorite players of all time, was going to be on this list no matter what. It's the Boomstick, Nelson Cruz. Yeah. Boomstick baby. He's got to be on this list. It just perfectly describes who he was.
I can hear Dave Simmons' voice in my head right now.
It's like his signature call. Like if Dave leaves us to go to the Yankees, the first thing I'm going to think of is "Hey now." Second thing I'm probably going to think of is like "What a Night," the Mitch Haniger game. And then the third thing is Boomstick baby. And then the fourth thing is probably like, "Hey Lloyd, back up the truck
to the airport." Yeah.
I love Dave
do some
Sims.
delivery. Yeah.
We are Dave Sims stands on this show. So if you don't like
I feel like we would have heard about the Yankees thing by now.
Yeah,
but
it seems like it. But so anyways, Boomstick, number 5. Number 4 might be a bit controversial and has an opportunity to move up the list. But for now, the Big Dumper comes in at number 4.
Number 4.
Yeah, it's number 4.
I have an issue with that.
Well, you're wrong because the top 3 is immovable.
All right. I'll hear you out on the top 3.
Big Dumper, so good.
Yeah.
Classic. It's the biggest contribution Jared Kelenic has ever made to the Seattle Mariners fandom. Is coining the nickname Big Dumper. Cal Raleigh, again, sticks around for a few more years. He has an opportunity to move up, but the 3 names ahead of this are so iconic, I can't justify putting the Big Dumper higher than 4.
All right.
So number 3, it's the King Felix. Like it has to be on the top 5, and I just think that Felix has done more for the Mariners than Cal Raleigh so far. We'll see what happens. Sure. So, but I mean, come on, how do you not have
Did Felix Hernandez ever send the Mariners to the playoffs, Colby?
Did Cal Raleigh ever pitch a perfect game? So what's more impressive?
Sure.
Yeah. So like, I think
he'll catch a perfect game one day.
Probably not. I mean, statistically speaking, but yeah,
I believe
the
in him.
King Felix, like it's the king, it's the King's Court, like it's all of it. Like
Mhm.
probably the most impactful nickname in Mariners history when you consider just the like the lore of the nickname and what it meant to the ballpark and to the fan base in a really dark time in their franchise. To have at least that you can kind of hang your hat on, the King's Court and all that stuff. So I don't know. Maybe I'm looking more at the bigger picture of the nickname instead of the actual nickname, but King Felix is a really good nickname.
So I think I have a pretty good idea of what's 2 and 1. I don't know which order you're going to have them in. Well, I think I know which order you're going to have them in, but I assume number 2 has to deal with a very tall pitcher, correct? Yes.
Oh yeah. Number 2, man. It's the big unit.
Yeah.
It's iconic. One of the better nicknames in the history of baseball. Okay. So not just Mariners lore, but the big unit, the best pitcher in franchise history. Sorry, King Felix, but it's true. Could have been you, bro. Could have been you, but nope. So yeah, it's the big unit, Randy Johnson. I wonder if his number will finally be retired after they retire it for Ichiro this summer. That's going to happen, by the way, guys, in probably August is when they like to do that. Ichiro is going to be inducted in the Hall of Fame. They'll do that in July, like at Cooperstown. And then on August, probably the next month, they will retire his number because he's now officially eligible, blah, 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 blah. Maybe they'll actually finally retire Randy Johnson's number 2, because before Ichiro was number 51, Randy Johnson was number 51. And there is an argument to be made that Randy Johnson is the best pitcher in baseball history. And for you to basically not acknowledge that he spent a decade here is really weird. And I know things didn't end on the best of terms, but the big unit is an absolute horse. And like, he absolutely deserves to be.
He's a big unit.
Yeah. I mean, he deserves to be recognized among the greats in Mariners history. And it just feels like he's really not, at least not enough to me. But anyways, that's a tangent. The big unit is a great nickname. And
that's very Mariners, though, to handle Randy Johnson's history with the organization.
Sure. I mean, look at how they've handled Alex Rodriguez's history too. Another like all-time great player who played for you, and they're just like, did he play for us? I don't think so. Like, so
at the very least, there you have like the steroid stuff, but still, like, he should still be honored. Don't get me wrong. You know how I feel about steroids. Yeah, but but at least that, like, there's an actual. You have no excuse with Randy Johnson. You don't.
No, you tried to gaslight the league and ruin his career by saying he has a bad back so that you can justify trading him to your fans.
Yeah.
And then the guy went on to win like 4 Cy Youngs in a row after you traded him.
A World Series.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, like you tried to gaslight your fan base into thinking it was a good idea to trade this guy instead of pay him. And he was mad at that because you tried to shorten his career with your lies. Yeah, of course. He should be mad about that. Anyways, we're diving into a part of history here that has nothing to do with nicknames. The big unit, number 2, would be number 1 in a lot, but number 1 is pretty easy. I mean, it's that dude right there. It's the kid.
Yeah, of course.
It's the kid. You say the kid, everybody knows who you're talking about. Everybody. It's Ken Griffey Jr. It's not really that close. In terms of like a nickname, is it better than the big unit? I don't know. It's comparable, but the kid is iconic. Like it is when you factor in what Griffey meant, not only to baseball in the city of Seattle, but baseball in general in the 90s.
Sure.
It is so iconic. Everybody knows about it. It's the backwards hat. It's the nickname. Swingman also in the honorable mentions, but it's the kid. He's the most iconic player in franchise history. He has the most iconic nickname in franchise history. His swing should be the silhouette for Major League Baseball. Like he's just that dude. Like he is that dude in every sense of the word. So yeah, Ken Griffey Jr., the kid, number 1 best nickname in franchise history. The Mariners have had some really good nicknames in their franchise, and including some iconic ones like the kid and the big unit. So yeah, I think it's pretty fitting that in this list of top 5 nicknames, Ken Griffey Jr., Randy Johnson, Felix Hernandez find themselves at the top.
Kind of a basic list. You played it safe.
I played it correctly.
You went with, the iconography.
If you're telling me that there are 3 nicknames better than my top 3, I'm calling you a liar.
I mean, over just nicknames, right? Taking iconography out of the equation for a second, Big Dumper is absolutely.
No, it's not, because iconography is very important in nicknames. Otherwise, Tuffy Gosowich might be on the list. Who cares? Oh, his nickname's Tuffy. Richie Sexton, Big Sexy. Oh, ha, 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 ha. Which kind of got lost in the shuffle because obviously Bartolo. But no, those are not better nicknames. I can
remember the commercial, matters. Big Richie.
Yeah.
Big Richie. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, there are not 3 nicknames better than that because iconography absolutely matters because the player makes the nickname. The nickname doesn't make the player. So, because if the nickname makes the player, then you're the Sheriff Jacob Nottingham instead of, King Felix, the kid, the big unit. And everybody knows who you're talking about. So, yeah.
So no honorable mention for the bartender?
No.
For the DA?
No.
I guess that in a way that is kind of just like shortening the name, right?
It is. Yeah.
It's David Ardsman's initials, but
it's a good call. It's one of my favorite Sims calls. Case closed. Another one for the DA. Like it's good. It's good. The bartender's pretty good. Just not really enough like staying power there. Just kind of like, when you think of the Mariners, you don't really think of like Tom Wilhelmsen for a while. And so I think, again, the iconography here matters.
Also, no love for Cornelius. Colton's going to be very upset with you.
Oh, no. A less podcast isn't happy with me. Oh. By the way, that Joe guy on that show, he sucks.
Right.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with Joe, but he stinks.
We love Mariner Mojo around here. That's just how Colby shows his love.
Disdain, sure, same thing. Sure. No Cornelius. You have to do more than hit a home run into the third deck to be worthy of this list.
Sure. So, did Colby miss any nicknames? Let us know down in the comments below. Are there any other reasons to be optimistic about the Mariners right now? Let us know in the comments below.
I hope so.
That's going to do it for our show. But before we get out of here, you suck. A reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Tiding Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Tiding Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.